Hello, good evening, everybody. For this part of the discussion, you can all show yourselves if you wanted to. Thank you very much for joining us. I see many known faces as the admissions are accepted. As we go through, I see Monique, I see Hubert, I see Desmond, I see Ashley, Dalia, I see Joanne, Vanessa, Jody, Vickers, Through the Lens, Michelle. This is great. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. All right, so I think I'm going to start off with the one part to try and just make sure that everybody's screens look fairly acceptable. And so I'm going to start off by just saying my name is John Fleetwood. You are now at the panel discussion of Microlight. And I am going to ask everybody to please help me to mute yourselves for now, including our panelists, so that I first just can speak without the interruptions, and then we're going to go further. We're going to start in another 4 minutes. But first of all, just to say that I am happy to be part of this discussion with my colleague Ravel Pillay, who sits on the other side, who is the coordinator of photo. And we're very happy to be welcoming all of you. It's a little bit technical because I need to share videos and I need to share photographs as the evening continues, so please bear with us. But perhaps just to start off by saying, if you all do the following, it might help you to see better. So if you go to the top end of your screen, you should see a little view button. And if you press on that view button, please select the gallery view. And that will enable you to see all the panelists as we speak at the same time. And for now, I am going to ask you for the panelists just to please get back to us so that we can see, we can hear you. So please, can I ask all the panelists to unmute yourselves? Okay, so I think we shall start. Good.
Cool.
Right. So first of all, a big welcome to everybody. My name is John Fleetwood, and I am I'm the director of Photo. Photo, of course, is a multi-operational platform for the development and promotion of socially engaged photography projects, of practices, and of critical visual culture. We run projects across the continent, but we are based here in Johannesburg. And you can follow us on phototool.co.za. As I mentioned, Ravel Pillay, my colleague and coordinator of Photo, will be managing the technical aspects in the background with me tonight. And of course, we are busy tonight with the launch of the fantastic book of Jansen van Staden. And I just need to get to that part. Let us see if that works. Perhaps not as well as I intended to. Right. So the book Microlight. So the book deals with a critical take on violence, trauma, and perhaps silences that come with war. But also it comes with the private lives of soldiers and how these traumas lingers often into the worlds of the next generation. Jansen's book unfolds firsthand and intergenerational traumas, interrupted lives, torn and haunted identities, and the devastation across the region. The book asks questions about history writing. But tonight's discussion deals with these aspects, wanting to look at a larger picture, and particularly the effects of the South African border war on the region and the fallout of the war, and how it affects the present, how it affects the post-war generations across the region, and this aftershock that we're dealing through, and particularly then through the work of young artists dealing with many of these aspects in their work, but also with the ongoing silences and invisibilities. So I want to start off by saying hello to our panel. You should be able to see our panel members. Helena, I still don't see you. You are there,
yeah,
right? Okay, there you are. I can see you. All right, so I'm going to introduce each of the panelists, starting off with Jansen van Staden. Van Staden is, of course, a South African photographer, and he's the author of this book, Microlight, that we're discussing tonight. His practice started with street photography as a conceptual entry point to reflect on his personal and social constructs of belonging and of disconnect. I've been working with Jansen since 2017, when I got to know his work through the Ernest Cole Award. And through that time period, I have worked with him in seeing how this book has slowly but surely developed. He became a fellow of the Goethe Institute's Photographers Masterclass in 2017 and graduated in 2018. Jansen received the CAP Prize, the Contemporary African Photography Prize, in 2019, when Microlight was still unbooked. Tonight, it is booked. It is a compilation of images. His work has been shown in various exhibitions and screenings across Africa and Europe. And of course, he lives and works in Cape Town. Jansen.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Helena is an Helena Uambembe is an interdisciplinary artist. Uambembe, sorry, is an interdisciplinary artist using performance, photography, and printmaking to recreate and reposition the history of 32 Battalion, the infantry battalion of the South African Army, founded in 1975, comprising mainly of Angolan soldiers. Uambembe draws on a history rooted in the small northwest province town of Pomfret, where she was born into Angolan parents and where her father was recruited into the 32 Battalion. The 32 Battalion becomes a master narrative she uses to investigate and explore the past. Fragmented pieces become a way of mending and compressing time while weaving together ideas around home and identity. And of course, she lives and works in Johannesburg. Helene.
Hello.
Neptune. Neptune was born in Angola, in Luanda. And as a toddler, he moved with his family to Lisbon. His work focuses on questions of identity and belonging, with a special focus on the influence of the external dominant cultures on youth in Africa. His practice is informed by having found himself without a sense of belonging to his Angolan national and cultural identity, nor to his upbringing in Lisbon. He eventually later found shared identity through youth, hip-hop, and church groups. He practices as a photographer, videographer, editor, and director. Neptune was selected to participate in the 2019 Kachupa Factory residency in Mindelo and Cape Verde. And he's also been included in the 2019 portrait show hosted by TTL in Johannesburg. All right, so I want to start off with some of the questions that we have in mind. And so, Jansen, let's start with you. It is your book that we are talking about. In 2017, I invited you to the Goethe Photography Masterclass. At that stage, I already knew that as a kid, you moved from place to place, and it delivered this sense of a periphery for you and your brother. You photographed while skateboarding, always dealing with communities on the outskirts, always dealing with people that were in the periphery. And for me, it was always amazing how you just gained access to these groups and became the middle of many of those situations. But then the masterclass came and you could travel to Kenya, where you started this new project, Microlight. Please tell us, how did Microlight begin?
Okay, cool. My brother and I, after my father's death, never had a chance to go see the crash site where my father passed away in a Microlight accident. So having this invitation to the Goethe Masterclass paid for, my brother and I took it upon ourselves to grab this opportunity by the horns and before the masterclass, do this journey and gain some clarity and a sense of resolve in what happened exactly at my father's death. So we traveled to Kenya. We booked one night in Nairobi. Then we traveled to Diani Beach, where the accident took place at a small private aircraft in Ukunda. From there, we met all the people who saw my father last. The pilot who survived. We saw a doctor who gave the autopsy report. We saw some of the people who worked with him. We also visited the last places he ate and the last places he slept in, as a way of healing. And at that stage, I didn't think much of the project. I knew that it was something that I had to do personally, me and my brother together. It was very much a tough psychological journey, but it was very needed for the pilot as well. We definitely saw the pilot as a man that was a little fractured because of the incident. He blamed himself, most definitely. And just this process was very healing for all of us. So I took the work, I photographed the whole journey, and I presented two bodies of work at the masterclass. The one was my street photography first, and the second was my Microlight. I didn't think I was going to get any attention on Microlight. I really wanted to focus on the street photography, but then no one said anything about the street photographs. And I immediately recognized that from everyone's attention on this project, that it was something that I had to complete.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit more about Microlight as a compilation of many different stories? So there's the story that you just described to us, photographing the site where the Microlight crashed. But before that, there were other avenues that led you to this project. One of them was the information that you found on your father's hard drive after his death. That then set off also after the Kenyan trip to go to various family houses across South Africa and visit the family. I also want you to talk about the archival images that you have included in the publication.
Yes. So after the Kenya trip, I started with a lot of panache and how do you say, instruction almost, to go and delve into this project. So I asked Yochi, who is with us tonight, I asked Yochi for the hard drive that he consolidated all my dad's photographs on. My dad was an avid photographer. He had hundreds and thousands of photographs. And I just wanted to see what he was photographing, check through the archives. And through this process, I found this letter addressed to his psychotherapist. The letter was entitled My Choices. When I read the letter, it's a very graphic and almost too honest tale of what he did as a part of his therapy. It wasn't intended for anyone to see, really. So it was a very unique insight into what happened. And when I read this, I was completely shocked. I couldn't believe that this was the man that I knew. The man I knew, I looked up to, even though we didn't see much in my early years. But I really looked up to him. He was my hero. And when I read this, it was unbelievable. I immediately called Yochi and asked him, what the hell's going on? Did you know about this? And we had a discussion about it. And then I had to sit down and figure out how I was going to approach this. And my initial instinct was to go and talk to the rest of the family as well and spend time with them and hear straight from them. Obviously, I can't talk to my father anymore, but hear straight from them what had happened and how my father changed and what they thought of the whole incident of his death and the whole incident of the letter. I read the letter to each of them, and it was very hard to confront them with this information. It was they knew of the stuff that maybe, I don't think they knew all of it, not the gruesome details. And when you read something like that to someone, it shatters your image of that person, and it's a difficult thing to grapple with. All they knew was
to reconcile, because you later were working with your father. He commissioned you to take photographs as part of his later career, where he had turned around many of these kind of ideological shifts. He had turned around in himself and moved away from some of those to become somebody that worked on mega projects in the region. And so some of the photographs that are included in the book deals with your going with him to Uganda, to northern Mozambique, where he worked to, in a way, reconcile and perhaps ameliorate some of the ideas that perhaps that he grew up with and that was part of.
Yeah, so this was part of it was a very organic process where as I photographed the family and went through the editing process, I incorporated my archive, and I started looking at it in a different way, as a way of reusing and reconstituting the photographs in a different way, instead of having them as a function where I was just documenting my father and his job. It has now become something with a new purpose.
Great. So, Helena, perhaps as an introduction, Jansen just spoke about some of the activities and some of the moments that his father had done as a conscript when he was fighting in the South African border war, where he was a conscript, of course, for the South African Defence Force. This was the Namibian War of Independence, and sometimes in South Africa we also talk about the Angolan Bush War. It was a military conflict that occurred in Namibia, at that time Southwest Africa, even in Zambia, and of course in Angola. This war happened between 1966 and 1990. It was fought between the South African Defence Force, the People's Liberation Army of Namibia, which was of course the armed wing of SWAPO, the Southwest African People's Organization. It was closely intertwined with the Angolan Civil War, and of course South Africans' own path towards a democratic election in 1994. All of this was about the independence of Namibia that SWAPO wanted, and of course that they couldn't get through the International Court of Justice in The Hague. And so with material assistance from Soviet Union and China and sympathetic African countries like Tanzania, Ghana, and Algeria, the war started to happen in 66. But in particular, between 75 and 88, the South African Defence Force staged a massive conventional raids into Angola and Zambia. And through this, they used and deployed specialist counterinsurgency units such as Kufut and 32 Battalion, trained to carry out external reconnaissance and track reconnaissance, thank you, and track guerrilla movements. I suppose the question to you, Helena, is where does your work start?
Ooh, yeah, I actually had a long conversation with someone about this. I think my work starts from 1975. Really, I think I was when I started my work, I was trying to think it in a very linear sort of sense, that this happened while it was so much intertwined, not just linear, but like histories, peoples, politics. And so my usual starting point is 1975 and 1976, where the battalion was really started and cemented to be part of the South African Army. And that is the year my father had joined. And before that, he was not politically active in any sense until he kind of encountered the South African Army and their start of the unit. And the work and the history kind of travels through Namibia, through Angola to Namibia, and then into South Africa, where I think I'm also, in a sense, trying to understand who this man was. I always had a fascination with him, with how he spoke, how he behaved, and the hardness that he carries. And it's a thing that I could not understand, and no one, so he wouldn't speak about it, and still today he doesn't speak about it. Even my siblings won't speak about it as much. And I found that going through history and actually digging into why I was born in Pomfret and why Pomfret exists, I had to go back to the history books to really uncover my father's history and kind of this sort of displacement of a people. Yeah.
Neptune, much of your work deals with this retake, this reintroduction to Luanda, the place where you were born, but perhaps the place that you don't know. I'm quite intrigued by the idea that you start to photograph within Luanda, a city that you don't know, of buildings. Tell us, where does your work begin?
What the fuck you're doing? You don't share a brain with you. You need to remember.
Sorry about that. So please. Neptune, just unmute, please.
Hello.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity. My work starts when I start to question myself about where I was going and where I come from. Because I grew up in Portugal. I was born in Angola, Luanda, and at the age of 16, I was back to Luanda, city that I totally didn't know, and still trying to figure out what makes me feel drawn to this city. I started photographing specific buildings in the city because they remind me of the old construction of Portuguese architecture. And it's kind of a way of linking me to my past, making me feel that somehow I'm connected to the city, but at the same time, I'm disconnected because it's a totally different environment, totally different people. And Luanda is very quick, very rushy, and I'm not very used to it. Used to the of Lisbon, some parts of Lisbon. Yeah, it starts there.
Okay, I'm going to start to share screen, and every time it will be a little bit of a jump around, so I apologize for that. But I want to start off by looking at this picture of Jansen. Jansen, this is a photograph that you took. Was it you? Who is in the photograph? I would also like to talk about this picture, and then finally this picture. 3 pictures in your book that for me somehow describes this journey that you've been on. Would you tell us about these pictures? Mike?
Sorry. The first photograph of the silhouette of my father I took on a trip with him to Uganda. This is next to Lake Albert. At that time, he was going to consult Mr. Henry Kajura, the Deputy Prime Minister of the time, on an oil deal that I think ExxonMobil, or one of the big mobile oil companies, was negotiating. So I accompanied him on this journey, and on that evening, I was very much inspired by Trent Park's work. He took photographs exactly like this of his parents in his backyard in Australia. And I never thought I'd have the opportunity to do this. So it's an image of my father, but what's important to me is it's an image of what's missing. It shows, it kind of sums up the journey of me trying to fill in the details of who my father was, the mystery and the clarification process. This is my father's camera. It was around his neck at the time of the Microlight crash. He was an avid photographer, and in Kenya, he hired a Microlight to take some aerial photographs of the site he was going to work on. Like I said, it was around his neck at the time of the crash. When we received the camera, it was obviously busted. We could no longer use it, and I kept it with me for a long while. And I always kind of knew that I wanted to photograph it. I didn't know how or in which process. So I had the exact same camera, and my camera, it turned out that had a scratch on the sensor, and I could see it on every image. So I thought I'll take my father's sensor and his brand new shutter and put it into my camera. And then I proceeded to photograph my father's camera with his own sensor. In doing so, what's significant for me is later on when I read it, it could read that I'm taking something that's positive and that was left, that I inherited from my father, the positive, and I'm reusing it as my own. And that which is negative, which is destroyed or maybe dark or bad, I'm letting go of. The last image is
I wanted to, Jansen, ask if I can talk about this particular picture as a way also to lead into Helena's work. So this is a picture of the ashes of your father. In a way, what it does, it wants to preserve this history, this person. And that's what ashes do, I suppose. But at the same time, you have photographed it in a way that perhaps turns around and questions it in a visual sense about how much it is, and also about the symbolism. And so this idea of looking at one person's life all contracted into this little heap of ashes. So this idea of time being switched into a very, very short space. And I was quite intrigued about that because a lot of the work of Helena deals also around questions of time. And so I'm going to do the same thing, Helena, if you can tell us a little bit about these projects of yours, please. Just give me a second. Let me find the right space to share. Helena.
So this performance took place at the Center for the Less Good Idea, season 6, if I'm not mistaken, last year around this time. And it came from the performance I did at Art Joburg as part of my residency at the Bag Factory. I was awarded the David Kulani Award. and I really wanted to explore the idea of uniform, wearing the uniform myself, and what it felt like. So the battalion's uniform was mainly brown, and the use of the sjambok was something very prominent in Buffalo in early days of Pomfret, where it was used as a discipline tool for people who kind of misbehaved or broke rules or did things that was not according to kind of military rules or life. So for example, if you left without permission, or women, so Angolans love fish, and it was not allowed for people to go fishing on the Okavango River. And a lot of people, more especially women, would cross the river by canoe to go fishing or to go buy fish. And there's a story of a prominent community leader where she was caught and she was sjamboked, given 10 lashes. And at the same time around, what was happening in Joburg in South Africa was the xenophobic attacks. And I was staying in Maboneng at that time, and it's in Jeppe where the violence was rife. So in a sense, I wanted to protect myself through the uniform, but yet I was so vulnerable, and it was a very emotional performance because I felt like I had taken on sort of the burden of my father of going into battle, of being protector, yet having no one that really can protect you. Yeah, so it's and the title came from one of Agostinho Neto's poems, Caminho de Mata, which means the way of the bush. Thinking of migration and movement, and just like what that meant for me, being born in Pomfret, of people who were constantly moved, and also in the backdrop of so-called, well, xenophobic violences at the time.
Neptune, I want to look at some of your work. And I suppose this very apt moment is talking about this idea of looking at of work that is about somebody that had moved from one space in the world to another space in the world, and now looking at these different spaces to perhaps see a different space. So by working and taking photographs in Luanda, perhaps you are also taking pictures of Lisbon. And so this idea of migration and how we look at spaces come to mind. You want to chat about these pictures?
Yeah. When I'm in the center of the city, these buildings are like flashes, like memories that I have about similarities with Lisbon. And at the same time, a part of me is drawn to the unknownness of not being able to define myself as where I do belong, because am I Angolan, am I Portuguese, am I what? And I constantly have this inner conflict with myself. So photographing these buildings are like the the middle point when I can know for sure that there's something there. Not just the structure, but the windows, the lighting, the texture of the buildings, the aging of the buildings are too similar, and I'm very, very drawn to that. It's a way of connecting myself to the warm memories of my past.
What I find interesting about this is the fact that you are photographing it at this kind of moment of dusk, of early evening, where the one starts and the other begins. The day ends, the night starts. I would like excuse me. I'd like to go to this now, which is a little video that Jansen had put together, and I'm particularly interested in some of these photographs, because as photography is about looking, there are also a lot of the interest in how photography can be about listening, and I'm particularly interested in these photographs that deal with listening. And so in his publication, Jansen had selected a number of different photographs that deal with listening, and I'm just playing that for you. So as we page through the book. So as we can see, he's playing around with these images of listening. And I'm wondering, as a photographer, Jansen, as an artist, what is the role of listening in your work? How is it that listening has become such an important part in your project?
I think it's a two-way avenue. One is to listen to stories, have conversations with strangers, and to get clarity from that, and just try to understand the other person's point of view, obviously. But the listening that I'm more concerned of is the listening of yourself, listening to the inner voice, the one that's guiding you, and the one you also question quite a lot. So each of these people have their own voice that they doubt and follow and have to question.
So in this particular picture here, we see Gert Nell's war-damaged right ear. I'm going to very briefly read a little bit from the captions that you have in the publication. In a letter written during therapy, Pa states that he made contact with 32 Battalion during his military service. I had hoped that the retired Colonel Gert Nell would be able to provide me with information. He had been the commanding officer of the Light Infantry Battalion from 1978 to 1979, the same year Pa had been in the military. Through a contact, I was invited to his home southwest of Pretoria. I explained my project and asked him to read Pa's letter. He became visibly agitated. The things that Pa stated he had done could not have happened under his command, said now. Pa would have been arrested. It's probably not true. So this act of listening to your question somehow doesn't happen. And I'm quite intrigued because I think, Helena, you also had spoken to Gert now. Maybe you want to chat about that experience.
Is he the go-to guy for everyone when it comes to 3-2? I interviewed him in 2016, and in that it's it's kind of those typical sayings that, you know, once a person gets older, they kind of set in their ways. And him kind of, when you read the letter, and when he read your father's letter, and that denial of the violences that happened, that were caused by the military and that happened to the soldiers, he seems to deny it or chooses not to remember it. Because I remember I asked him instances of violence against women by the soldiers, and he kind of brushed it off and said, well, I couldn't keep control or you know or know what everything that's happening in Buffalo. And him saying that he could have gotten arrested, it's like, but it didn't happen because there were so many violences that happened that they caused against their own soldiers, and almost denying that truth or choosing to kind of forget that truth, which frustrated me in interviewing him, but kind of shows what type of military regime it was, the indoctrination. English is leaving me. Sorry, but also the belief in the cause that they were fighting for is still very much there, even till today. Yeah, so he's a interesting character. I find him interesting.
I think he is one of the few commanders of the war that has such an open door to people with questions from the past. Yeah, which I appreciate. I also appreciate a little bit of his honesty. I asked him about, because he became very agitated when I talked to him, and he started talking about the something that you are affected by as well, the surge of soldiers writing about their experiences in a very heroic way, and kind of blowing up and justifying these actions that they had. I think there's a lot of psychological things around that to, like self-preservation, that lacks questioning. But he was very pissed off that people are writing things and borrowing stories from each other in order to glorify their acts. I think that's interesting, because there's an acknowledgement of a lack of questioning, even though he's not questioning himself. He's also just accepting. It's a very intricate situation.
I remember he also mentioned that in the interview with him, where and it's quite true. There is this kind of glorious light to 3-2, you know, seen as one of the most elitist unit. You should be very proud. I remember when I was at First Record Monument, someone said to me, like, you should be very proud to have a father who was in that unit. You know, they fought bravely. And you're like, but they did really messed up stuff. And people go and buy medals and like uniform of the battalion to kind of say, hey, I was part of it. And then when questioned, like, which year were you part of? What is your force number? They kind of like, and I think that's what bothered me, and what also fueled my drive to kind of unpack this history, is this false pride around it, and wanting to be brave, while actually I think they all need therapy. A lot of them need therapy.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
I suppose this is where this photograph becomes kind of interesting for me, because this is a self-portrait, Jansen, where you position yourself and pose part of this heroic story, but of course it's in the comfort of your sitting room. Tell us about how this picture operates to, I suppose, dispel and debunk this idea of the heroic person.
The picture for me speaks mostly about the ease of access to violence as solutions to problems. The caption reads in the photograph something along the lines of, it's Pa's chickens, the neighbor's dog, and Opa's gun. So this was Opa Piet's gun, his 22 caliber. I photographed it myself doing it because my father, when he was 16, he raised chickens very honorably. He was very proud of them. And one day he came home and the neighbor's dogs had killed all of them. And in retaliation, he went straight to Opa Piet's gun closet, got the gun out, and waited on the roof of the house and waited for the dog to rear its head through the doggy door, and he shot him. The story goes that he got the hiding of his life, but just that ease of violence as a solution is what I'm getting at. What I'm also getting at is I'm not really holding the gun very well. If you look closely at my left hand, if I would have shot that gun like that, I would probably get injured in my eye or something. Even though the gun isn't that very heavy when you shoot it. It's a reappropriation of my father's violence. I'm taking it into my own hands and acknowledging it. It is part of me. It is something that is inside of me because of his acts.
So I want to go now to some of the pictures of Neptune as a way to look at self. So a lot of the work that Jansen is dealing with deals with these notions and questions of what documentary practice is within photography. I'm very interested to understand how you, Neptune, are working with some of those concerns, because in your work, you are not really a documentary photographer. Instead, you are a photographer that creates fictions out of space. But at the same time, there are questions around self, for instance, in this picture. Do you want to chat about that?
It's like, I'm not very good with words, but I will try. My inside look of Luanda, it's a mixture of feelings, but mostly sad feelings, because when I got out from Portugal when I moved from Portugal to Luanda, a huge part of me was left behind, and a new journey started where I needed to figure out where I belonged, where would I make new friends, what kind of friends would I do, how would I connect with people, and above that was a heavier feeling of knowing my father for the first time. I was 16 years old, and all of that I didn't know how to deal with. And it's like this feeling of constantly moving, of not having my roots in a place, not staying in a house for more than 1 year. Always stop, and I still can't stop until now. I move a lot. I don't have, like, I can't be in the same place for more than 1 year. And these pictures, I started to try to show that, because if you notice, those buildings are like tilt. I think that's the word, tilted.
Yes.
And it's a kind of metaphor of how I feel inside. It's like moody, dark. And at the same time, as I said before, these buildings are like the architecture, the Portuguese architecture left from the Portuguese in Luanda. So there's a sweet and sour connection with these buildings. And yeah, I think that's it. I hope I explained myself very well.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to go to some of the pictures now and talk about this question of history and preservation. So part of your tour that you had all across the country as you visited your family, Jansen, meant that you visited these places, these museums, where you started to photograph kind of in particular military museums of war. And I'm really interested to understand how you see these images making sense of the violence and what they start to believe or what they start to portray. And I'm particularly interested, Helena, how this question around history making and rewriting history is at play in your work. So this question around how we preserve, but also the role of photography, how we preserve. Jansen.
It is very interesting going to these museums. They are mostly empty. There's not a lot of people, it seems, that are interested in this this history, which I find is true. If you talk to the youth in South Africa, not a lot of them are clued up about the border war. But if you go to these museums, it smells funny, and it's old, and it's never questioned. If you go there, the things that are there have been there forever since the war. By photographing them and giving them a new purpose and reappropriating them, I wish to use them as a part of my little micro history that I'm writing. Even though they might be, let's not say misrepresentational of history, but almost skewed and impartial, not complete, as a view to look at South Africa's history. If you look at this photograph, there's a photograph of General Rommel, the German general, on the right-hand side in that panel. It's very interesting how this is immediately incorporated into South Africa's history, where there's a huge lack of Black history in these museums.
Helena. I'm going to take you now to a picture of yours about this question of preservation and history and how that works for you. Do you want to chat?
So with this body of work, a photographic series, I think it came of a place of frustration, and I feel like that frustration is brewing again currently with what's happening in Luanda, with protests, and I wanted to kind of insert myself in history, in these decisive moments. So these are like archival images. In this image, it's Daniel Chipenda, Savimbi, and Holden Roberto. And those three men played a huge role in how my life turned out to be. It kind of, especially Daniel Chipenda, in the creation of the 3-2 Battalion. So I really wanted to kind of insert myself to question this history, to try and dismantle it and to be part of the conversation. So in this series, I often make hand gestures and try and kind of make eye contact, even though I'm just a shadow, I'm just a silhouette. Like most people, most of the Angolan society and most of the 3-2 community. So besides the soldiers, there were also families involved in the kind of making of 3-2, wives, children, and in me trying to kind of get into the image. It's almost as if these people are silhouetted. They didn't have much of a say, even though they had some sense of agency. They were like kind of shadows that were easily passed and forgotten. Yeah. And I titled it "A Luta Continua Até Quando." Was kind of questioning the separation of the Pomfret community to Angola, even though it's in South Africa, but it was very much Angolan. For me, that was my experience of Angola. The food that we ate, in an attempt to continue culture, to continue and preserve a people. So this was just off the back reading what was happening in Angola with people getting arrested for kind of protesting against a government, which is happening now. So it was, this work was fueled by frustration and an attempt to kind of get in there and release that frustration through photographs and through interrupting photographs.
Thank you. All right, so I'd like now to turn to our audience and ask them to start asking us questions. We're going to facilitate this through the chat section. So if I can ask people to feel very comfortable to write some questions down that we can use, that we can put forward. I'm also making our audience aware that we are recording. So in the next section, I'm going to ask people also to speak. So at that time, just be aware that we are recording this and we'll want to play it back. I want to talk about the authority of photographs, the authority of telling the truth, but also the authority to kind of create narratives. And I'm very interested, Jansen, in your approach, that in some photographs, you really question this authority and kind of present us with perhaps other kinds of options. Maybe you can talk to us about this photograph and how the truth matters in this picture.
I wouldn't say there's a singular truth in the picture. That's a big task. Maybe the only truth there is that it changes. But as far as the subjective truth goes, which is what you do when you read a photograph, it becomes your own subjective truth. In creating this photograph, I wanted to portray violence in the aftermath of the war as violence in South African living rooms that is not spoken about. It's this pink elephant in the room, and it's there, and maybe there's an uncle that's an alcoholic, maybe there's a mother that gets beaten up in the room, but no one questions where these things come from, but it's there. This gun is a PKM, and it was my father's favorite gun in the war, as he said in the letter. Just to address Desmond's question, I'm not going to reveal what is in my father's letter. It is absolutely almost out of place and completely personal. Anyway, so the PKM was my father's gun, and he got it. It wasn't issued by the South African military. I'm assuming he got it from an Angolan soldier or a Namibian soldier, and it could be anyway, or Zambian even. The gun itself is an appropriation of the AK-47. It's pretty much AK-47 turned upside down. So I got the gun at I found the gun at a place that uses what do you call it? They put lead in lead into the gun's firing. What do you call it? I'm not even sure what you put it. They make the gun unusable, right?
In the barrel.
And, yeah, in the barrel. They make the gun unusable, and they rent it out for movies and TV series and all that kind of thing. So I found this gun, and I was really keen on photographing it in my friend's lounge and having time with it. Unfortunately, when I rocked up at the place, they said that the gun is still live, and I need to rent it out with an operator, which is very expensive for the day. And I had to think on my feet, and I asked the guy in charge, isn't there someone, one of the staff members that are qualified that live nearby? And he said, yes, Corné lives upstairs. So this is Corné's lounge. And I put the gun in Corné's lounge in a few places, and this is the one that worked. So it's in this, there is a truth in this, and the truth is in the telling of my history. By appropriating situations and objects and photographs, and the act of taking a photograph, I'm telling a micro history. I'm telling my story by doing these things.
Can I just say,
of course,
I thought that this was like either your mom's lounge or like, because it feels very familiar, like that wooden chair. The deco in the lounge feels very much like what military houses look like, and even the whole, I don't know if when you walked into Nell's house, the guns he had on the wall and how proud he was, and that, oh, this was gifted to me by Savimbi, you know, we manufactured it here in South Africa, like, yeah, here's my deco. So it really feels almost when I walked into his living room, it felt like a time capsule, because it was almost untouched. Nothing was modern. It was very much kind of old furniture, with the doilies everywhere. So it makes sense. It is a form. These objects, in a sense, kind of do tell a history, and even if it's just a micro history.
Yeah, sorry. It is very interesting that you mentioned Nell's house. When I think of it now, his whole house is decorated around these military objects. Even the cups he gave me coffee in had the 32 Battalion emblem on. So his whole presentation of his house, I imagine his wife had a tough time navigating all this, all her stuff surrounded with the military archive.
Okay. I see a question that that relates to another set of photographs. I just want to find them. If you guys give me a second, please. Maybe the better place to look for it is in the book itself. Right. So the question is from Benita, whose identity we will hide, about these series of photographs and how they started to happen. And I suppose it starts off with this picture of the hand grenade, and then following in the book, there are these 4, 5, 6 portraits. Jansen, you want to tell us about them?
Yes, so as I traveled and visited family members and spent time with them and heard all these stories and histories from them, one story stood out, which was shared by all of them as the moment that my father changed. I think my father, as part of his therapy process, he went back to the family members and explained this incident to them, and they had a moment of reconciliation. And Tanitia told me the story. Pa was in Pa was part of the reconnaissance wing, and he was in charge of gathering information in any way possible, which meant he interrogated people, which consequently meant he tortured people. in such a interrogation incident, a hand grenade went off in the room, and no one knows really what happened. It's the stories that I have only. When he arrived home, or they sent him home. They said he had gone bossies. That was the old school word for post-traumatic stress disorder. He couldn't cope with it anymore, so they sent him home for a little while. When he got home, he was disinterested in anyone else. He didn't want to spend time with anyone. He put himself in his room and listened to a record of Glenn Campbell, which is also featured in the book, called The Rhinestone Cowboy. That's another story. Back to this one. The hand grenade is the M26 hand grenade that was designed by the Americans and used in Vietnam and I'm sure many other wars. In South Africa, the NAL manufactured it, and it was definitely used in the South African border war. And the fuse of this hand grenade takes about 4 seconds to explode. So as a way to try and portray the trauma felt by all the family members, not just as a trauma that was lived because of their own experiences, but also as a trauma that they could see happened when my father came home. This unspoken thing that no one could explain. The child that they knew was now missing. He was a different person. So it took 4 seconds for that hand grenade to explode and change my father's life, or had a big effect on it at least. So I took these photographs as 4-second exposures without a tripod, handheld, as a way to relate to this incident.
Thank you. All right, so I think we can now go to that part of the discussion where I'm going to ask my colleague Gravel to help me in particular. Maybe we can ask some people some of the questions that had come out, and also ask people to join in the conversation. So by unmuting yourself and by creating a video, we will be able to see if you wanted to ask a question here. But I want to go to one of the questions of Joanne Duggan that says, Jansen, you said that when you read a photograph, it becomes part of your own subjective truth. Could you say something more about this, please? And also perhaps that would be for Jansen, but I think it's also very much for Helena. How does this, how does subjective truth work in your work, Neptune? Jansen, let's start off with you.
I think explaining a subjective truth is kind of giving away something that the reader of it shouldn't hear. It's almost like Leonard Cohen writing a poem, and historians and artists all reinterpreting it for their own benefit, or to align with their story. So I think when you look at a photograph that someone else took, the meaning you get from it is the meaning that you put onto it. It's not necessarily the meaning that the photographer intended. It could have traces of it, but your own history and your own experiences are the lens that you look through at this photograph. So the photograph's meaning the photograph itself has many, many meanings to many different people, which is what makes it interesting.
Should I go next?
Yeah, go for it.
I think subjective truth has what has helped me to kind of rebuild and dismantle the history of 3-2, or what is said to be the history of 3-2, and what has been written by your Piet Nokiers and your Jan Breitenbergs. Mm-hmm. And it's those personal truths of people that I've interviewed, and that is their subjective truth, and there's kind of a common narrative that goes around. So, and that has helped in dismantling the history of 3-2, and the things that is not written about when they speak of this kind of pride of 3-2 or talked about. And that for me is very important, Had I just read Nakia's book and said, okay, this is what happened, but knowing very well in overhearing conversations in the house or around gatherings, there's a whole other story that is being told. So subjective truth really is important for me. It may not be the ultimate truth, but it forms part of that history, and maybe of the lie of the history.
Yes.
It's great. It's great to see the faces appearing. It gives us a sense of an audience that's really important. In front of me, I've got the dummy of the photo book, which is in production, will be in production, and it would be appropriate for me to say that you can put your orders through if you go and look at Jansen van Staden's website. But there's a very fantastic, well, a very good question, Verity Fitzgerald, that's asking to tell us a little bit about the process of making the book, of bringing the book to a physical format, the order, the edit, the rhythm, maybe things that came easily and things that you struggled with. And I'm very all ears to this answer.
Yes, you should be, because you've been involved the whole time. So John is my wall, my feedback, and thank you, John, always. Sure. So I've made, I think, probably like 6 handmade little dummies of the books. As soon as I realized the significance of the book, the project, I immediately visioned it as a book, and I started playing around with the format. It's a very interesting way to preserve photographs. Obviously, if you compare it to exhibitions, it's a very personal object. It becomes very personal. It's in your home. You can page it through whenever you want, whereas an exhibition is done in over 6 months, and you can't really carry it away with you. Books age over time. Yes, that is the second dummy, I think. Yeah, that's the second dummy. So I really try to play with things. I wanted a non-linear narrative for this, because I tried working it as a straight narrative where the 3 main events will go one after the other, and I really struggled to edit it like that. The 3 events being my father's Microlight crash and visiting the crash, the second event being me visiting the family and spending time with them and photographing them, and the third event would be my archival photographs of my father, which I took on a trip to Uganda. So if you put it in a linear line, it doesn't read very well. But as soon as you start playing around with it, something different happens. It's a play. It's a very interesting way in to see how these photographs interact differently to one another as soon as you put them next to another photograph. It's a very interesting process. I enjoyed it very much. Each time I made a dummy, I started from scratch, and I tried again and again. And in the end, I looked for visual cues to bind the things together, like the hearing photographs or photographs of people sitting. And in grouping these, almost it becomes almost a subconscious reading of it. Like you're trying to see what is significant with the one that relates to the other. And if you look closely, there are some elements sometimes, and sometimes there aren't. But I really wanted the viewer to guess and look and question what is going on when they page from one photograph to the other. And then when they finally arrive at the captions at the back, they read the caption and then they understand that specific photograph, and they go back to the photograph and read it again in its context. And then its meaning changes, and the book becomes a process. The book becomes an interaction, which I find is something I look for when I look at photo books, this interaction.
All right, so I'm now at the point where I think we need to start to finish off. But just on that last point, I I would like to add a little bit about this idea of a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so Mika Conradi, who has drafted some text for the publication, writes that the simple structure of a simple story resembles a line, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I'm really interested around how we understand war and how the book can try and talk about this intergenerational trauma that all of you have experienced in one or other way. And maybe as a last statement, we can start to talk about that. Is there beginning, is there middle, and is there end? How does your work respond to that?
Me.
Maybe I can start with Helena this time, and then Neptune, and finish off with Jansen.
Okay. Oh, if there were to be an end, I would resolve my trauma by maybe going to therapy, and then I would like be fine, and then I'll stop making art. But then life would suck.
What's the say? How does the saying go? All the young men suffering, art's bread and butter, right?
So I don't think. I don't see an end to it because there's so much to unpack. It is so complicated. Maybe the end that I dream of is seeing an Angola that is properly liberated, a different party in power, seeing infrastructure at play, seeing myself going home in a whatever home means, because I exist in multiple landscapes. So seeing that, going to Angola, living there, being happy, seeing people happy, and that's so idealist. Like, oh my word, I have big dreams, guys. that maybe would be a perfect end. Having the opportunity to go back to Angola with my father, and him resolving his demon. Maybe it would be him resolving his demons. That would be the end.
That's very beautiful. Neptune.
I honestly, I don't know. Maybe end will be first step will be acceptance of a situation I cannot change. And I don't know. I don't think it's an end per se, because like Uambembe said, it's too many things that still you have to cover, still have to talk about, because we are affected in so many different ways, and each one of us feels things differently, lives things differently, and I don't know. And I think would be like accepting the situation, like dealing with it normally without being, I don't know, without being anxious, without being paranoid, without being, yeah.
Part of acceptance is also rejection. So I think one of the important points for me about all of your work is that it deals with acceptance and rejection. And it deals with acceptance and rejection of love, of history, of nationalism, violence. You have to accept
Ideology.
it. You have to reject it. Exactly.
Yeah.
Jansen.
If a beginning is the start of tension and the end is a resolve, then it's very much akin to how Western music is formulated on. It's a continuous process of creating conflict and resolving, and creating conflict and resolving. So I find the things that happen in between on the way to these steps is very interesting. It's where you can say where life happens, you know, where these gray areas are, where we learn things and unlearn.
I thank you all. I thank you all for our audience for this wonderful talk. We will be playing back this recording and hopefully have it onto the website in a few days. But I think that there is a very important moment where I just would like to get everybody to start to look at these artists' work. Please follow Helena, please follow Neptune, please follow Jansen, and of course, please follow the book. Microlight is at the moment a dummy, a very professional dummy, I have to say, very beautifully put together. In my eyes, one of the most interesting publications, photo book publications from South Africa. And soon it will be printed into a book form. And of course, part of this process is self-publication, because there are so few publishers that support young photographers. And so this is a really urgent request that you guys please start to go to Jansen's website, Jansen van Staden, and support, order his book. It's a perfect gift for Christmas. But I would like to thank our audience. Thank you very much for the time, and I would like to thank our panelists for being fantastic, courageous, sharing of quite difficult situations and quite difficult questions around themselves, identity, love. I thank you all for this courage that you have. And I thank you all, and particularly Ravel, for bringing all of this together. Thank you. We'll stay on a few minutes longer for those guys that still have questions and would like to chat. Just to say hello to Jansen and to the panel members. Let's open up all the mics and chat and make noise. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Uambembe. Thank you, Neptune. Thank you very much.
Thank
Well
you.
done, guys.
I would still like to keep in touch with you guys if that's okay.
Yes,
And
please. Yes,
Neptune,
please.
Jansen,
Yeah.
even you, John.
Definitely.
You are in touch.
Yeah, so I definitely, yeah. I wanted to ask Neptune, how is it going in Luanda? Like I've been seeing videos.
Yes, it's Independence Day today, right? Yeah.
Independence of what?
Yes, exactly.
Did you take to the streets?
Explain to us the complexities of it.
It's like it's a very sad day because people are marching against police brutality, against the not very fair government that we have. And when it was like 6 a.m., police and militaries flooded the streets and are like not allowing people to get out of their own houses, and even shopping, people are not allowed to do it. So it's very sad, actually, very sad. One person died, shot in the head, cold blood. Yeah, sad, very sad.
Yeah. So it was a planned protest against police brutality, the government, and so on, and kind of retaking and reclaiming this so-called Independence Day, when there isn't independence, there isn't freedom for people. And it was really frustrating. I got so annoyed how people are like, Happy Independence Day, Angola, and stuff like that. And it's like, you can't say that without commenting on what is happening currently. There's no happiness if people are afraid to speak out against police brutality, or if people on Independence Day get shot by their own government in the head. It doesn't make sense. So Anyway, see, it will never end or get resolved if these things carry on happening. Oh.
Yes. I mean, I'm really on a numb place, I think, because it's like I felt home here, and always been always had conflict with police, not by what I did, but the way I look. And it's not new to me. Like, look on my shoulders, and yeah, the things really didn't change since I came in 2007 until now. Like, police still the same, government still the same. We changed presidents one step, but things are worse. Really worse.
But Neptune, the way you look has always been the issue for you, because being in Lisbon, it was about the way you looked.
Yes, and here is also about the way I look.
Maybe you need to change your look again.
I don't know. I think.
Dude, is it the dreadlocks?
I feel good about myself.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the dreadlocks or the tattoos. I don't know.
Okay.
But I feel comfortable with myself. Like, people have a problem with me. I don't have a problem with anyone. I'm a peace guy. Relaxed. Very relaxed.
I used to have dreadlocks, and I got a lot of attention from it. A lot of unwanted attention, definitely. People would scream at you from across the hall, like, "Yo, Aya, have you got some weed for me?" So it's very friendly, but then the police come around the corner and you start hiding away because you know they're looking for you, because you look like someone who smokes weed, someone who they can arrest.
Yep.
Has this become easier, Jansen?
Yes, but now even if you go to Cape Town, you put on a beanie with your long beard, you'll be an Aya. Like, people will think you're a Rastafarian. Yeah, long beard, long hair. There's a very strong Rastafarian connection in Cape Town, a very big community.
Okay, guys. I think we're gonna finish it here. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time. And
pleasure.
all the best.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, audience. Thank you very much. Cheers, Ashley.
Bye.